immigrants. My great-grandparents came from Norway. My grandfather worked for Brown Company. He quit school at 9 so he could help pay the bills. He became an engineer for Brown Company and built the dam that's across the street here. My question is, they had to come here on visas. They had to have a plan. How do all these people get here now? Undocumented. How do we let them in? How do they stay here?
Well, about 40% of them come on visas. And then the visa expires and they don't leave. And so,
And why not? Why doesn't somebody check up on these people?
because we don't have an entry-exit tracking system. Well, basically, America's a hotel that checks people in, but we have no idea if you checked out of your room. So we don't know if they're overstayed. Yeah. Well, and that's why we need an entry-exit tracking system at both airports and seaports, so that we know in real time. So I talk about this all the time. Is why, and we need to know in real time when people come in and when they leave, so we have a real-time record of who's overstayed visas. That needs to be fed into an e-verify system, where employers are required to verify you online whether the person you are hiring is legally here. Today, the only requirement is that you sign a paper and produce a Social Security card, but those are easy to make fraudulent.
Yes, and down in Florida, when I worked for Burger King down there, they had a manager that had 2 Social Security numbers, and out the window she went, you know.
Yeah. It happened.
That's our tracking system, and if we know they've got a Social Security number, then why can't we keep track of them?
Well, oftentimes they're using someone else's Social Security number is what happens when they're here
Like
illegally.
6 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes. They also vote in Chicago and places like that. But so your point is, that's the second point, is when you need to have a more reliable, because ultimately, why do people come illegally to America or overstay visas? Because they know they can. They know someone who did. So let's say that your cousin comes illegally to the United States and 6 months later is working and making money and sending it back. And so it encourages you to try the same thing because they did it. We know it can be done. So I think it's important. You have to shut off the job magnet, and you do that through E-Verify. You have to cut down on the overstays, and that's how you do the entry-exit tracking system, so we know in real time who's overstayed visas, and that information is fed into E-Verify. And the third thing you've got to do is there's got to be more physical, literal security on the southern border, not just for immigration purposes, but for all these other things, including national security. And it's not rocket science how you do that.
Look at the guys that bombed 9/11.
Well, they were here on student visas.
In a Burger King down there.
Yeah.
They came in smiling and making comments so that we would remember them. But, you know, how did they get here and stay here so long?
They came on student visas, and in fact, we now know that ISIS, for example, is actively recruiting people like doctors, physicians, and also student visa people that don't fit your typical profile to use the legal immigration system of the United States to legally enter the United States. The San Bernardino attacker was here on a fiancé visa. It's actually...
But her husband was a legal resident. He was born here.
He's a U.S. citizen, absolutely. Born and raised in the United States, radicalized online, which tells you that homegrown violent extremism is a huge threat that we face. But on the issue of her, his fiancé, here's an example of, no matter how much the administration says we're fully vetting people, this was a process breakdown. In essence, they vetted her. They just didn't vet her well enough. It broke down. For example, they never confirmed that they even knew each other before they got engaged. I mean, that's a huge red flag, right? You've never met each other, you don't even know each other, but you're engaged. I think that's strange. And they didn't pick up on that. They never followed up to confirm it.
Countries do that.
Well, I think in the 21st century, that's a huge red flag. If you're engaged to someone you've never met or even heard about, and you're using to bring them in, you got a big problem. And again, the law required them to confirm that they knew each other before they were engaged, that they had met before they became engaged, but they didn't do it. Somebody who was in charge of processing the paper didn't do their job. And so this is an example of what a different threat we now face. Because 20 years ago, that sort of situation was not right. It would be illegal, but it was probably an arranged marriage designed to give somebody residency. In the 21st century, it might be a threat from a terrorist group. And that's how much the world has changed on us, and therefore our policies need to be adjusted to that new reality.
Hello, Senator.
Hi.
You said that these new climate change policies are raising our cost of living, but how do you plan to deal with this pressing issue of climate change without doing that?
Well, first of all, the climate's always changing. There's never been a time the climate didn't change. Never. And the question fundamentally is, how much is man contributing to these specific changes? And from a policymaker, what can we do about it? So here's the problem we have. The problem we have is they want us to pass X number, make these changes, and they present them to us. So I asked the scientists, if we pass all these things you want, how much will it change the climate back in the direction you want it to go? And their answer is, oh, you won't notice it for 100 years, and only if every other country does it too. And in fact, even the numbers they agreed to in Paris, a lot of scientists are saying that's not even enough. And then I turn to the economists and say, what will this do to our economy? And they say it'll make us a more expensive place to create jobs. In a country where already people are, a historic number of people are unemployed, it will make the cost of living more expensive at a time when already millions of Americans are struggling paycheck to paycheck. So they want me to support policies that hurt our economy but don't really do anything for our environment. They just set an example. I think that's a bad trade-off. So what is a better approach? And by the way, this deal in Paris is a disaster too. Number one, the Chinese have signed this agreement that they're going to cut carbon emissions, and we all know how the Chinese always keep every agreement they ever signed to, right? Like they signed an agreement not to cyber attack the United States when they visited Washington, and the next day they were conducting cyber attacks. But the second point that I would make is, the Chinese have said, and by the way, we agree to all these benchmarks. We are the leading carbon emitters in the world, the Chinese are. We agree to all these benchmarks that have been set, but we're only going to do them if it doesn't hurt our economy. Well, it's going to hurt your economy, so that means they're not going to do it. The third thing that's really outrageous is the president committed us to a fund where you, the American taxpayer, is going to contribute money to a global fund to help developing countries. And who are the developing countries? China's a developing country. India's a developing country. So we're basically going to take money away from you to help them lower their carbon emissions. I'm not supporting that. And the fourth point I would make is, how do we deal with it? I think innovators are already helping us deal with it. America's already cleaner than it was. America is already becoming, it's trending even cleaner than we've ever been, but not because of government mandates. Why has America become cleaner? Because the American innovator figured out how to drill sideways. So now we can use more natural gas than ever, a lower carbon fuel, for example, than coal. Why is America more innovative? Because we become more energy efficient. Today, cars get more miles per gallon than they've ever gotten before. Why is America more moving in a cleaner direction? Because battery life and electrical powered cars are becoming longer and increasingly more affordable. Why has America become cleaner? Because American technology and innovation is making wind power and solar panel power and renewables more cost effective and more market competitive. The American innovator, given the space and the time, will continue to do this for us. We are moving in this direction anyway, and we are moving in this direction for purposes of energy independence. We're moving in this direction for purposes of having the most diverse portfolio possible. But these government measures that they're trying to ram down our throat are going to dramatically hurt our economy. I, in good conscience, cannot support policies that take a country that is already struggling to provide jobs and upward mobility for millions of people and make it worse, while the countries that are leading the world in pollution are doing nothing except polluting more and emitting even more carbon. So I want us to deal with these issues on the basis of innovation. And by the way, by relying on sources of fuel that are cleaner, like natural gas, which America has an abundant supply of, like nuclear energy, which we know how to do better than anyone in the world, and it is a zero carbon emission fuel. And these are things that, let's do the other things too, wind, solar, biofuels, let's do them all. Let's lead the world in all of them. But don't let the government artificially pick one over another, because you're manipulating the market and you're driving up costs for people that are already struggling with a high cost of living.
Senator Rubio, so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
My name's Nathan Wells, and I'm a full-time student at the White Mountains Community College. I wanted to preface my question by saying that last year we had a job fair at the college, and there's a state trooper that had a table set up, and he was asking me, we were making small talk, and he was talking, and he asked me what my major was. When I told him my major was early childhood education, he said, "Oh, that's the wrong field." He said, "You're never going to make any money there." And the sad thing is that he's correct. There's very, very little money to be made in that field. But my question would be, given the current rise in developmental disabilities, we're talking rise in drug use, rise in poverty, and an alarming rise in violence, the evidence shows that all of those pieces can be largely done away with if children are given the right care in the first few years of life. So my question for you is, how as president, could you financially empower the field of early childhood education?
Well, I support early childhood education. I have throughout my time in public service, and continue to believe that it is a very effective way that children as young as 2, 3, or 4 should be in learning environments, not just warehousing childcare. But I also believe the federal government really has no role to play in that. That is a local and state issue. And in fact, if you put the federal government in charge of it, they'll mess it up. They'll make it worse than ever. And that's what's happening now. And so I think one of the things we need to begin to accept is that there is not a federal government solution to every problem in our country. That the President of the United States is not in charge of every issue before our land. The federal government is a very limited government, designed to do things like national security and leave the rest up to state and local communities. If you wanted to create innovative new policies to get more people into early childhood, you're going to have a lot more influence in front of your school board or your local community than you're ever going to have in Washington, D.C. So that's where the power to make these decisions matter. Now, I do think I support policies that will make it more affordable and easier for people to do it. Like, for example, I support an increase in the per-child tax credit. Why do I support that? It's not just because I have 4 children. It's because I know that raising children in the 21st century is expensive. And one of those expenses that's in place is what do you do with your kids during the day while you're working? So take the case of a single mother who makes $15 an hour and has 2 kids on her own. Someone's got to watch them while they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old before they get into kindergarten. So today, the only options available to you are a child care center in some communities, where they'll watch the kids, they'll feed them, they'll put them down for a nap, but they're not learning. If we could empower parents to keep more of their own money through a refundable increase in the child tax credit, where each child, you have to be working to get it, so it's pro-work, these families have more financial resources to put their kids in a learning environment at that young age. The second thing is I believe that the child care tax credit, which has been 30 out of 50 states, child care is more expensive than going to college. Okay, think about that. In 30 out of 50 states, child care is more expensive than going to college. I actually think we should expand the child care tax credit so that students can use it. Because one of the things that will keep single parents from going back to school is they have no one to watch their kids. Again, empowering them with more money of their own that they can use to put their kids in a better setting. The other thing I'm a big supporter of is school choice. And the reason why I support school choice is because the only people in America who cannot put their kids in the right setting are poor people. Rich people can pay for them to go to any school they want. Upper middle class families just move to a better neighborhood with better schools. The only people in America that we say to them, you must send them to the school we tell you to, even if the school isn't working, are poor families. So that's why I'm a supporter of school choice. That's why I'm a supporter of creating a scholarship, of allowing companies to pay a portion of their corporate taxes to a not-for-profit scholarship organization that gives scholarship to poor families to send their kids to a school of their choice, and hopefully empower more parents to get them into these settings. So as president, I will have no problem saying that we should put more of our children at a young age in learning environments at 2, 3, and 4 years of age so that they're learning. Kids can learn to read at 4 years old. And my kids did. But ultimately, what those programs look like and how they're designed have to be decided at the state and local level, because that's where you're going to find innovation that will open the doors to that. So as president, I have no problem telling people that early childhood education is important, but it is primarily a state and local function. We don't need the federal government involved in pre-K through 12 education. We don't need Common Core. We don't need any of these things. That power belongs at the state and local level, where you can influence them a lot easier than you can your congressman, your senator, the president, or some bureaucrat at the Department of Education.
That the federal program of Head Start is a failure?
Well, I would say that the program of Head Start is outdated, because basically the child has to follow the benefit as opposed to the benefit follow the child. Today, the Head Start is largely only available for specific areas that they tell you Head Start funds are only available here. What I would like to see is those funds turned over into a fund that follows the child, so that if you qualify for Head Start, you can use those funds to go to any setting that you want to put your child in, not just the places the federal government says are the places you can put them in. It really needs to be a benefit that follows the child, not the child have to follow the benefit.
We need programs in our schools, too, that help young couples, young teenage girls and boys to know what's expected of them as parents. I mean, I grew up with flower power children growing up and finding their own path. Now, these people have had children. What did they tell their children about being a grown-up?
Well, you just hit the nail on the head, and that is, there's a lot of problems in our country that the government will not be able to fix. There's no law I can pass to make people better parents. There's no law I can pass to make people better husbands or wives. If I could, my wife would probably run for office if she could get something like that passed. I think we need to increasingly as a society recognize that some of the most influential things we will ever do happen in our homes. That what happens in our house is oftentimes more important than what happens in the White House. We do have very significant societal problems in America. And as heartbroken as we may be, there are limits to what government can do about it. Now, that's why I'm for a pro-family tax code, because I think empowering family will have an impact on our long term as a society. That's why we shouldn't have any policies that discourage marriage or family formation. That's why I'm a supporter of religious liberties, because I believe that our faith communities are an important part of instilling and reinforcing values in our people. But ultimately, guys, as a country, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. For ourselves, for our families, for our children. Not constantly look to the government and say, Mr. President, what are you going to do about the fact that, families, the kids today aren't being taught values? Well, that's the job of parents and communities, not the job of the government. And if we try to get the government to do it, they're going to mess it up.
Do you think religion plays a part in that?
Absolutely.
It's not the center of the home anymore.
I think the faith community is critical. Now look, we're a free country. You want to worship trees, you can worship trees. You want to worship nothing at all, you have a right to worship nothing at all. But I am telling you that the values that are Judeo-Christian values are a key component of this nation's 200 years success. And the reason why is it teaches us to be charitable. It is not a coincidence that the American people are the most charitable people on earth. The government's not making us contribute to charity. You know why we do it? Because our faith has taught us that caring for the less fortunate is a moral obligation. A faith community gives reason behind our laws. When I teach my kids don't do something because it's illegal, well, laws can always be changed. But if I can teach my kids don't do something because your Creator in heaven is very disappointed in you, that's a powerful way to instill values in people. And so absolutely it is.
We're letting atheists dictate to what we can present out there.
Well, I'm probably not going to win the atheist vote, so I'm done. But I think we're a free country. If people want to believe in nothing, they have a right to do that. What they don't have a right to do is impinge on the rights of people that do believe in something to exercise those beliefs in their lives and in their community. So last night, I think it's in Maine, a teacher was forced to take down a Christmas tree from her classroom. Now, it was a Christmas tree with Hello Kitty ornaments. There wasn't even any sort of religious connotation to it. I mean, things have gone too far. I mean, here's the point. If you're offended by a Christmas tree, don't look at it. I mean, who's offended by a Christmas tree? Who's offended? I mean, I see all kinds of symbols of different faiths. It doesn't offend me. We've gone too far on this stuff, right? I mean, it's gone crazy. To the point now where you're afraid to say Merry Christmas to somebody because they might get offended. Why? If you don't believe it, why are you offended? What would offend you from something you don't think is true? So I think we've gone too far in the opposite direction here. We're a free society. We're a pluralistic society. I respect everyone's right to believe in whatever you want. But it's not just the right to believe. It's the right to exercise your faith. And that's a critical difference. One thing is to say, you have a right to believe whatever you want, but keep it to yourself. That's not what the Constitution says. It is the freedom to exercise your faith, and that means to live out the principles of your faith. And for people that are concerned about that, well, let me tell you what my faith teaches me. My faith teaches me to love my enemies, to care for my neighbors, to feed the naked and to clothe the naked and feed the hungry and care for the less fortunate. These are incredible values. You better hope the next president of the United States is influenced by values such as that. And it's not a coincidence that this country that had such strong principles in our founding has been so successful. I guess I'd make one more point in this regard. Our nation doesn't even make sense without these spiritual principles. Because on its very founding, this country was created on the belief that we are all given certain rights by our Creator. Not by the king, not by the government, not by the Constitution, that our rights come from an all-powerful God. Life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness are God-given rights. And the purpose of government is to protect those rights, not to decide them or to grant them. So we were founded on a spiritual principle. If you yank that away, then where do these rights come from? They're only whatever your leaders decide they are. And that's what we stop being special or different.
Made 30 million laws to enforce the 10 Commandments.
I like that. 30 million laws to enforce 10 Commandments. Yes, ma'am. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. It's a gentleman behind you, but we'll get to you, too.
Morning, Senator. I have a three-part question. As a veteran, I'd like to know how you're going to streamline our benefits with the VA to include even basic services and homelessness for vets. Secondly, if we put boots on the ground in the Middle East, being an Iraq War veteran, one of the things that tripped us up a lot was our rules of engagement. So how would you tackle that problem? And lastly, as a current government employee, I'm not going to say I've been the victim, but I've had to go through not receiving a paycheck because the government shuts down. So next time the government shuts down, is that going to include congressmen and senators?
Yeah. Okay. Well, a couple of points. Yeah, and the third point is the government shouldn't shut down. It should be reduced. Government should be made smaller, but it shouldn't shut down. And it doesn't help your story. Ultimately, when the government reopens, everybody gets their checks back retroactively. It didn't help you if you missed a payment on your bills. On the second point that you make about rules of engagement, well, let me get to the first two on the veterans. On the veteran point, I would say, number one, I'm the only one running that's ever done anything about the VA. And last year I passed that law that gave us the power. Let me back up. There are really good people at the VA. So this is not a smear on everyone working there. I would tell you the vast majority of people that work at the VA are good people. They care about veterans. Some of them are veterans themselves. And then you've got people that are not doing a good job. And those people, you should be able to fire them. So last year we passed a law that said if you're not doing a good job, the VA can fire you if you're a senior executive. We don't know how many people they fired. It looks like they've only fired one, and that's on appeal. Meanwhile, they've given out dozens of bonuses. That makes no sense. So when I'm president, we will actually not just enforce that, we will pass a second law that says it's not just senior executives. If anyone is not doing a good job at the VA, we can fire you. We will do that. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to make the benefits follow the veteran, not the veteran follow the benefits. So the GI Bill. Does the GI Bill say, here's the GI Bill, but you can only use it to go to military colleges? It says you can use the GI Bill to go to any accredited school in America. That's what it says. Why isn't the VA benefits for health care the same thing? It will be when I'm president. Your VA benefits will follow you. If you want to go to the VA because you love the VA, you can go to the VA. But what if they make you wait 6 months to see a doctor? And there's a hospital down the street ready to see you right away. You should be able to take your benefits and go there instead. My brother is going through that right now. Not exactly that case. He's going through a long and very complicated appeal. He was a Green Beret from 68 to 71 in the 7th Special Forces. One day he jumped out of an airplane and knocked out his front teeth. They took him to the dentist. They fixed him up, but they never made a record of it because he was in the 7th Special Forces. And, you know, they had a different process back then for Special Forces. Now he needs dental work every 10 years. He has to file these long appeals processes, and his brother's a senator. So just imagine somebody else that what they're going through. It's outrageous. So we need to process the VA so that it follows the benefit and it's easier to process through that. You raise homelessness and other issues. Absolutely. It's a huge problem. One of the things that's happening in our country, unfortunately, number one is the mental aspects of coming back from war. We have veterans that have suffered traumatic brain injury and don't know it because there was a detonation nearby. It created a concussive effect. It was never documented. And then it begins to manifest itself. Worry about concussions in football. Worry about concussions among our veterans who have suffered traumatic brain injury, and it wasn't even recorded because they were near a blast, and the brain is very delicate in those sort of situations, but no one ever wrote it down, and now it's starting to manifest itself through memory loss. The other is integrating people back into society. Why don't we give people credit, college credit, licensing credit for what they learned while they were in the military? So if you were a truck driver, and you were hauling explosives on a dirt road in Iraq or Afghanistan, are you telling me that you don't qualify for a commercial license in America to haul eggs on the interstate highway system? If you were learned skills, if you fired these $1 million missiles to fly through the window of a building halfway around the world, you're telling me you're not qualified to run a manufacturing plant or do work in the private sector? We should create more synergy between the skills people acquire in the military and how we license it in the private sector. Let me give credit to a union here. The welders, pipe fitters, and plumbers are doing a really good job of taking in veterans and giving them the additional training they need to be welders, pipe fitters, plumbers, and the trades. We should be doing more of that. Give them credit. They've done a good job on that. We need more of that sort of integration for our veterans where the skills that you're learning in the public sector are now being applied to integration in the private sector. And your question about rules of engagement, most important question the president ever has to answer. There's a very straightforward criteria. Number one, is a national security interest of the United States at stake? In essence, not a symbolic strike, not we're sending a message to the world strike. Are we dealing with this militarily because the interests of the United States are at stake? Number two, is military force the best option available for us? In essence, has diplomacy failed? Or is there no diplomacy possible? Because, for example, ISIS has no ambassadors or diplomats, and they can't be negotiated with anyway. Number three, are we providing our men and women the resources they need to succeed? And that means the equipment, and the training and the weaponry and the intelligence necessary to win. The objective is victory. We've defined victory. This is what victory looks like. And you have the resources you need to win, and you have the rules of engagement that you need to win. Don't put men and women into harm's way without the resources and without the appropriate rules of engagement. And we've done that, and we're doing that. That's why these defense cuts are so problematic. These defense cuts mean we will not be able to provide them in a short amount of time the resources they need to succeed. These cuts in the military mean that people are now being redeployed much faster and much longer than they've been in the past, putting a tremendous strain on families and our servicemen and women. So these are the criteria that I will look at before ever putting any one of our servicemen and women in harm's way. We make a very important promise to men and women in uniform, and here's the promise we make. We will never put you in a fair fight. If we ever put you into a fight, you're going to have better training, better weapons, and more information than any adversary you will ever face. There is no way we will be able to keep that promise if we keep cutting our military every year the way we're doing now. We won't be able to keep it. And that's not fair to you, and that's not fair to the people that have served us in the past, and it's not fair to the people that are serving us now. We'll change that when I'm president. I promise you that.
Senator, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for coming. And I'm speaking here, part of the American dream. That's your platform. Mm-hmm. And I'm a first-generation American. My parents were born in Quebec province, and I'm a union member. And I really appreciate your mentioning the union, because that's the crux of my question. I've worked 3 jobs. I travel 125 miles a day, 6 days a week to go to work, because there's no work here for me. The 3 jobs that I've had were at the biomass here in Berlin, and an energy plant.
Mm-hmm. You drove by it?
Okay.
Yeah.
And,
the wood chips?
Pardon me?
The wood chips plant?
Yes, the wood chips, yeah. So I worked there, and this year, and I worked at a natural gas pipeline in Williston, Vermont, and drove it 2.5 hours every day to go to work and back. And I worked at a coal-fired power plant in Bow, New Hampshire, Merrimack Station, which was owned by its Eversource, now was public service. And the crux of my question is that there's a wall in between the Republican Party and union people. I'm conservative. I'm pro-life and pro-Second Amendment, and I'm probably, I didn't go along with my parents and go, I'm not a Roosevelt Democrat, I'm a Republican. I was a Republican, I'm an independent now. But I'm an independent because the Republican Party ceded northern New Hampshire, the 3 northernmost counties. We don't see a Rubio office here. We cede our elections to the Democratic Party up here. And what I want to know is Barack Obama made Joe the Plumber famous with his question about the coal-fired power plants. Barack Obama said that he would overregulate coal-fired power plants, which is where I get a lot of my work, out of existence. And so now we have windmills, we have all these alternative energies. Number one, would you consider a Manhattan type project to nuclear fusion instead of fission power plants? Number 2 is, would you break down the walls? Ronald Reagan, our most conservative president, the best president of my lifetime, was once a president of the Screen Actors Guild for like 9 years. And so he was a conservative and pro-union. So what I'm asking, and the Republican Party needs minorities, they need union people. I see union people on jobs in the lunchroom with Bernie stickers on their hard hats. It blows my mind. And so we need to tear down the walls we need to be inclusionary with union people. And I was glad that you gave a shout out to the pipe fitters and the iron workers. I'm a union laborer. Here's my union card, and I'm a member of the Massachusetts Laborers Union. I don't want to travel to work, but if we could have a sensible energy policy with the Keystone Pipeline, are you in favor of the Keystone Pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely.
And is there a way? Is there any so that I'm just so tired of ceding the union, all the union workers, say 90% of them, that vote Democrat, because that's what they do historically.
I agree with you 100%.
What will you do to include union people on your march to the White House, to the Oval Office?
So first of all, the quarrels I've had with labor unions have been on the public side. And that is because the government works for us, not us for the government. And it goes back to this thing I was talking about, the VA. If you are not doing a good job, government should have the ability to fire you. And you've got public unions that have become so powerful that you can't fire a government employee even if they refuse to work or not work well. And that's what my quarrel has been. On the private side, I actually often highlight issues that the private unions care about. The Teamsters, the largest group of Teamsters in the world are UPS truck drivers, for example, and they're facing regulatory impediments. The welders, pipe fitters, plumbers, the Keystone Pipeline is just one project, but there are hundreds of other projects like that that are being held up by the regulatory state. So my argument basically is we're going to make America the best place in the world to create the kinds of jobs that people like you fill. And those jobs are being hurt right now by these regulations that you mentioned. You talked about wind. There's jobs in wind. There's jobs in solar. There's jobs, obviously, in biofuels and biomass. There's jobs in coal and nuclear and in natural gas. I want us to have the most diverse energy portfolio possible. Let's do it all. Let's be the leader in all of them. Why do we have to have one and not the other? Let's do all of them. That's what my argument. And we're going to make it easier to create jobs by making it all of them. Here's the other thing that's going to happen if you lower and stabilize the price of energy, which is why I always talk about natural gas. If we have a natural gas advantage over the rest of the world, which means that keeping the lights on and running a manufacturing facility is cheaper here than it is in another country because our gas prices and therefore our energy prices are significantly lower. Do you know what that means? That means we're competitive again. That means we can become an economy that makes things again. And once we become an economy that makes things again, do you know what that means? That means they got to hire people to run those machines and fix those machines and apply those machines. That means jobs are the kinds you're talking about. So I do agree with you that we need to do a better job of focusing on that reality because the agenda, and that's why I always talk about skills training. Part of the problem we have in America for the last 30 years is we started telling our kids, look, trade school are for the kids that aren't that smart. The smart kids go to college. The kids that aren't that smart, those are the ones that have to go to trade school. That's a lie. That is a lie. If you go to any of these 21st century manufacturing facilities and you see the machines that these people are operating, these are complex pieces of machinery, so they're smart. Number two, trade school are for kids that want to make $50,000 a year at 18 years of age. Because when you graduate and you're certified and ready to work as a welder, you can make $50,000 as a first-time welder. You can make $50,000 and up. Long-haul truckers. I know someone who's a long-haul trucker that made over $100,000. Hard work, a lot of driving, obviously, a lot of nights away from home. But we're not training people to do this work anymore. And part of it is this cultural disconnect that we've started telling young people, those jobs are not the jobs you want. We have to have a president that celebrates that kind of work. That kind of work doesn't just empower people to make more money. That's what you build communities around. Entire communities are built around this. You get a major manufacturing facility back into a community, and that community springs to life. Because now what does that bring? Workers. And what do workers become? Customers for the shops, homeowners, volunteers at the PTA, the parents of the children that go to school, the volunteers at churches and synagogues on the weekends. This is the backbone of our country, and we need to bring it back. And we can. We can compete with anyone in the world, but not with a government that is keeping us from doing that. And that's what we have to do. That is the disconnect. I come from that background. My parents weren't blue-collar workers in that sense. My mother was a maid at a hotel. My father was a bartender, a member of a union. I walked the picket line with him when I was 11 and 12 years old in Las Vegas, Nevada. So my point is, I come from that environment in the sense that these are the kinds of jobs. My parents were never rich. They were never famous people, never made a lot of money. Let me tell you what they were. They were homeowners in a safe and stable neighborhood. They were active parents in the lives of their children. They became retirees that weren't rich but lived with dignity and security. And all four of their kids are better off than them. That's the American dream. That's what makes us different from the rest of the world. And we need to make it easier for us to create more of those jobs. So I'm telling you, if you are a member of a labor union that works in energy, works in construction, works in developing infrastructure for anything, you should be really upset at this administration. Because these crazy regulations and these crazy tax policies are forcing the people that want to hire you to take those jobs to another country. That's what they're doing.
But that message isn't getting out, Senator.
Well, that's why we're here. Then we're going to get that message out. But thank you for reminding us. That's really important.
Why are you going to revise the tax code so it'll be more fair to everybody?
The tax code? Well, first of all, if I told you, design for me a tax code that encourages companies to leave America, you would be hard-pressed to find a better one than the one we have now. We have a tax code, number one, it has the highest combined business tax rate on the planet. On the planet. So basically, if you do business in America, you are going to pay more in taxes than you do in virtually any other developed country. We have a tax code that says to American businesses, if you make money in another country and you decide, I want to bring that money back to America, we're going to make you pay taxes on that money twice. So the result is they don't do it. They leave their money in the other country. You know how much money they've left in other countries? $2 trillion. Do you know what $2 trillion is? $2 trillion is the size of the entire Russian economy. That's what's sitting in American corporate cash being invested overseas instead of here. The third point is, talk about manufacturing and union jobs. We live in an economy now with this tax code that if a business says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to invest $100,000 in a new piece of equipment. And that new piece of equipment means I'm going to have to hire 2 or 3 people to operate it. Well, today, if you want that $100,000 to write it off your taxes, you got to do it on something called the schedule of depreciation over a number of years. We're going to fix all those things I just mentioned. Number one, every business in America, from the small S corporation that runs a dry clean shop to the big companies, all of them, none of them will pay more than 25%, not 35, 25% flat. That is a huge tax cut for small business because most small businesses are organized as S corporations or partnerships. They're pass-throughs, which means you're paying on your personal rate, which could be as high as 39.5%. Number two, we're going to have a territorial system of taxation. And what that means is if you're an American company and you make $1 million selling things in Germany, and you take that $1 million and bring it back to America to create jobs here, you're not going to pay taxes on it twice. You're only going to pay taxes on it once, and that is in the country where you made the money. So we can bring some of that $2 trillion back to the United States. Number three, we're going to allow companies to immediately expense their investment. So if you buy a $100,000 piece of equipment and spend $100,000 hiring people to fill that job to operate it, you're going to be able to write that off your taxes that same year, the entire cost. So suddenly, now it becomes more cost effective. Yeah, I'm going to have to come up with $100,000 to buy this piece of equipment, but I'm going to get the $100,000 back off my taxes in that given tax year. So that companies have an incentive to invest more in America. By the way, we got to deal with regulations too. If I pass a regulation that forces you to buy a $100,000 piece of equipment that you can't write off your taxes, that's $100,000 you don't have to hire more people, to give your workers raises or bonuses, or to expand operations. That's why regulatory reform is so important as well. We are going to have a pro-work, pro-family, pro-business tax code that allows America to be competitive. I'm telling you guys, and I know you believe this, we're the most productive workers in the world. There's no worker on this planet that produces more per hour than the American worker. None. They're cheaper than us in some places, but they're not more productive. And number two, and they're cheaper not for long either. And number two, there's no more creative and innovative people in the world. Americans make up all kinds of stuff. Every day they invent incredible things, which create new jobs and new opportunities. It is our government that's holding us back. It's a miracle this economy even grows 0.1%, given what our government is doing to us. If we can put in place policies that allow us to be globally competitive, there is no nation on earth that can compete with us. There isn't. All you need is a president and a government that will give us a chance to do that, and we can win against any nation, any economy on this planet. But they're not giving us a chance right now. They're killing us with these crazy, backward policies.
Senator, this will be your second to last question.
Okay.
You made an allusion to your relative young age when you talked about waiting your time at the outset. And I have a question. Do you have confidence in your ability when you're actually sitting across the table from Putin or from the mullahs in Tehran and getting the job done for us?
Yeah, well, first of all, it is true that there are people running for president that have lived longer than I have. What is not true is that anybody running for president has a better understanding or shown better judgment on the issues we face today than I do. Second, and particularly when it comes to foreign policy, I'm the only one running for president that has carefully and repeatedly, for a long time now, explained what Vladimir Putin is doing. I know who Vladimir Putin is and what he's all about. I've called him a thug and a gangster because he operates as one. I don't think he's offended by that, by the way. And unlike some other people running for president, I wouldn't feel good about it if Vladimir Putin was saying nice things about me, because he's also a killer. But he's a cost-benefit analysis guy. And the reason why Vladimir Putin is doing what he is doing is because he thinks he can get away with it. He views this president as weak and misguided. He believed that 7 years ago when the president did the reset with Russia. He didn't see that as a diplomatic outreach. He saw that as, this guy's soft. It's time to test him a little bit. And so he did. What Vladimir Putin today is arguing is, I want a sphere of influence. Any country that was part of the Warsaw Pact or any country that was once a former Soviet republic, they're under our control. Before you, America, or any country can have a deal with them economically, diplomatically, culturally, you got to come through us. We should never accept that. From day one, he will know that we'll never accept that. So I'll go in knowing exactly who he is, and he'll know I know exactly who he is. Number two, in the issue of, we wouldn't be dealing with the mullahs in Iran. I mean, there's nothing really to negotiate with a radical Shia cleric. I've already said exactly what I would do on my first day in office. We will cancel the president's deal with Iran, and don't buy into all this talk that, oh, we can't do that, all these other countries are already on board. Guys, if a company has to decide whether to invest in Iran or in America, because if we reverse the sanctions, what it basically means is if you're doing business with Iran, you can't do business with America. You think they're going to pick the Iranian economy over the American economy? They're not. We are the sanctions. And so the point is we would reinforce those sanctions, and we'll make it very clear to them. If you want nuclear energy, you don't need it because you're an oil-rich country, but if you want nuclear energy, you can have it the exact same way South Korea has it, which is you can import enriched material. You don't need to enrich your own uranium and reprocess your own plutonium. And if you try to do that and build a weapon, we're going to destroy your program. We don't want it to lead to war, but war is a lot better than living in a world with a radical Shia cleric in Iran possessing nuclear weapons and the ability to deliver them to the United States. And so I've been very clear about this from the onset. So I feel not just confident in my ability to deal with it, what I feel very confident about is that I've been saying these things for 5 years, before some of these things even happened. You may recall, but I think it was the third presidential debate, I said, in less than 2 weeks, Vladimir Putin will be conducting airstrikes in Syria. And some people mocked me, what are you talking about? 2 weeks to the day, I'm talking about 2 weeks to the day, they started conducting airstrikes. I know what these people, who they are and what they're about. They have precedent in history of people just like them. We will deal with them for who they are. And more importantly, you will have a president that believes this is the most important and powerful country in the world and is going to act like it. Russia has a $2 trillion economy. We have a $19 trillion economy. Russia is not the equal to the United States on the global stage. They're an important country because between us we possess 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. And we have no quarrel with the Russian people. But their president is not someone that we're going to treat as someone who's an equal, especially given his goals and his aims. And Iran is governed by a radical Shia cleric. He's a religious figure who wants to trigger the apocalypse. There's no way in the world I'm going to leave my children with a world in which a guy like that has nuclear weapons. There's just no way we're going to do that. It's not going to happen. And we're going to be clear about it from my first day in office. Thank you for your patience. I know you were ready earlier.
That's right. Thank you very much, Senator, for coming here today. My question is really two-part. One, I think that race relations has been an all-time low under this administration, and part of that has affected the random violence towards police. As the wife of a police officer, and my son was just certified as a trooper in New Hampshire, this issue is very dear to my heart. And the silence from Washington has been deafening. And I want a president who has my son's back.
Absolutely. Let me tell you first of all, before I get the second point that I want to talk about this issue. The overwhelming majority of the men and women who serve us as law enforcement and first responders in this country are incredible people. And I say that because if, God forbid, tonight any of us run into trouble and we call 911, these are people that are going to be willing to show up and die before we do. Think about it. These are people we don't even know who are willing to put their lives on the line so that you or any of us are safe. One of the most moving images of the attack in San Bernardino is a video that someone took on their phone of a police officer telling the group with him, guys, don't worry, before any of you get hurt, it'll happen to me. This is the mindset of someone who goes out there every single day and does this. And this is also true not just for police officers anymore, because first responders, firefighters, and AMTs, one of the things that these killers in San Bernardino did is they were trying to leave behind radio-detonated pipe bombs. And it sounds like the reason why they wanted to do that is that when the first responders arrived, they would detonate them and kill the firefighters and police officers that responded to the call. So this is real, and we celebrate what they do for us every single day, because there is not a single one among us that at some point hasn't needed their help, whether it's a minor fender bender or something far worse. And we're so grateful to them for what they do. There are a significant number of communities in this country, however, where minority communities in particular feel as if their relationship with law enforcement is really bad. And I personally know people that have confronted this. I know a police officer in Miami, Florida, an African-American gentleman who's been pulled over 8 times in the last 2 to 3 years. Never given a ticket. So what is he to conclude from that? I'm being pulled over because someone looks at me and thinks I don't belong in this car in this neighborhood. And it upsets people. The point is, no matter how we feel about it, if you have a significant percentage of the American family, particularly young African-American males, but other minorities, who feel as if they're somehow looked at differently, Whether we agree with them or not, the fact that they feel that way is an issue we've got to confront as a society. We have to be, and look, it's a lot of instances it's tough. You have an 18-year-old kid who commits a burglary, stupid, does this burglary. They hire a public, or maybe he isn't even committing the burglary. It was just part of 3 people that were involved in this. They all got arrested. They assign him a public defender. The public defender has 5,000 cases they're handling. So the public defender says, just plead guilty. You'll get a slap on the wrist. He pleads guilty. He's now got a conviction on their record. Then they try to go out, turn their life around, and get hired, and no one will hire them because they got a conviction on their record. So they get angry, they get upset, they get disenchanted. Or an 18-year-old interacts with the criminal justice system, and instead of diverting them early, hopefully we can save this person, they get locked up. Basically, these prisons become trade schools for criminals, where other criminals are teaching you what they do when they get out. Then they get out, and they're now stigmatized for the rest of their life. So we've got to confront all of this. A lot of this is societal. It's not government laws. A lot of it is we have a breakdown in our culture. And it's manifesting itself. Look, there is a consequence to broken families. And a lot of these kids are being raised in less than ideal circumstances, not just in minority communities. But when you have a child being raised by their grandmother, who's also raising 5 other kids, because dad has never been around, and mom is working 2 jobs, is in jail and rehab, or moved in with her boyfriend, you've got a lot of strikes against you. This is a difficult thing to deal with. These are societal issues we're confronting. It's real. So I do think it's important that as a president that understands both perspectives, but doesn't exacerbate it. Yes, there have been instances in this country that I can't justify, and neither can you. You've seen some of these videos, okay? And they're troubling. And you've had other cases where we haven't been fair to law enforcement, where we've allowed lies to be perpetuated about what really happened. And as a result, you have police officers today that feel more targeted than ever, especially in some places when they hear this rhetoric. So we've got an issue here we need to confront. Let's not exaggerate the overwhelming percentage of people that serve us, and I mean in the 90s of people that serve us in law enforcement are good people that are doing the best they can in an increasingly difficult society. And then we've got an issue that we've got to address, especially with young African American males who feel locked out of the promise of America. And they're a significant percentage of the American family. We can't be a great country if we don't address that. And you know who the first people to tell you that will be? Law enforcement. The ones that are patrolling those neighborhoods, that's why they get involved after work. That's why some of the best youth sports programs in America are run by law enforcement. Because they'd rather deal with these kids when they're 7 and 8 than have to deal with them when they're 18 or 19 and committing crimes. So I think we can figure this out, but we have to have a president that is a source of unity for America. Not someone that looks to use these issues as a way to pit us against each other in order to win the next election. Because presidents, and what presidents do and say, has consequences. And when you have a president that has spent 7 years pitting us against each other in order to get to 51% in the next election, you see the consequences of it. We won't have that when I'm president. So I want to thank you all for being here today. I'm really asking you for your vote. I need your help to get this done. I look forward. I know that some of you are going to take your time and analyze this process as you should. You are hiring someone that you're going to have to live with for the next 4 to 8 years. So it's got to be someone you like to begin with. But more importantly, you're doing so at an important time in our nation's history. Our identity as a nation is at stake. And I guess my point to you is, I know that times are tough. I know the issues we face are not easy. But we can address these things. Every generation before us did. Now it's our turn. And we're going to do it. And when we do, this is what history is going to say about us. That like every generation before us, we did our part. We confronted our challenges, we embraced our opportunities, and we left America a better place than we found it. So thank you, and God bless you. Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas.